Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Prepping by Faith, and today I wanted to share an article with you guys directly from the World Economic Forum. So, this came out on January 2nd, and it's entitled Consumers Are Key to Tackling the Global Crises. Let's Work with Them. So let's go ahead and take a look at this article and hit the highlights. There's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on, heat pumps especially. So as we go through here, it says that global shocks have led to consumers facing huge price hikes in their food and energy bills. No joke, right? The cost of living crisis has highlighted the widening inequalities gap post pandemic. The public and private sector must work with the consumers to find sustainable solutions. So let's see what they kind of have planned in here. So they go on to talk about how these energy and financing costs are astonishing. 92% of our members said that the people in their countries are adjusting their budgets to pay for food, some even going without. When asked how they're going to deal with these rising prices, 68% said household debt had increased, and 59% that had access to healthcare had also been affected. So they're trying to rethink this. So, how are they going to do that? So they went on to say that food systems that work for all. This is what they're talking about in this article. So they say that they found that in particular, an overdependence on cheap food imports has flooded many national markets, forcing out local producers. And I agree with them there. I mean, that is a huge problem. But are they really championing the local markets, the local farmers, like they are saying they are? They say that they want to get back to more of these local sources and work with these people. But everything that I've seen says complete opposite. You know, they come out with new laws, new regulations. They want farmers to comply with, this sustainable green energy. They're unable to do that with farming equipment and all of these net zero requirements. So, how is that really helping us to go more local when all you're doing is forcing them out? And then you're allowing these other, big companies, big corporations, your Gates of the world to come in and sort of purchase all of those crops, those lands, because they have the money, they have the capital, they can do whatever they want. And then we are, in this environment where we're in even more regulations. So, they talk about protecting consumers in crises now and in the future, building supply chains rooted in food sovereignty and agroecology, transforming food environments to make food accessible for all. We hear a lot of this, making everything available to all, making it a fair, equal environment where there are no, sort of large players, large nations that are consuming everything, and that everybody gets their piece of the pie. This is what they are going towards, because that is more of socialism that eventually leads into communism, right? So develop inclusive and ambitious food governance frameworks. So they say that this is not the kind of immediate response that many governments are reaching for, but in the long term, it's going to empower consumers, help the local farmers, and meet these climate goals as well. So they talk about the energy, the cost and energy prices. They want to, one of the things that they mention in here, and this is where the whole heat pumps thing comes in. They say, for example, heat pumps could provide a simple, important change that would be safer and cheaper, more sustainable for those living in cooler climates, and which could save consumers up to 31% on their fuel bills compared to conventional heating. So they're touting this as being this ultimate solution. So I wanted us to go ahead and take a quick look at heat pumps. And I went ahead and went to this website. I'm going to link all this stuff for you guys, like I always do. So if there's anything that you're sort of questioning that I touched on during this conversation that we're having, you can always check these out for yourself. But this is from a company called Contour Lines, Ask the Builder, and they explain how heat pumps work, how essentially a heat pump is not much different than a car. So you can go forward or reverse in it, right? So in the winter, the heat pumps sort of pump the heat from the outside air and bring it in. And in the summer, it pumps the heat from inside your home and pushes it out. So it can work as a heater and as an air conditioner. So they talk a little bit about how this works. Um, And the question was asked, do heat pumps work best at 50 degrees Fahrenheit? And they say that they work very efficiently at 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But what they say is that around 37 degrees Fahrenheit, many heat pumps reach what is called the balance point. So at or near this temperature, the heat pump needs to run constantly to produce enough heat to maintain a comfortable indoor temperature. So as that temperature continues to drop, it says that the heat pump then needs help from traditional electrical resistant heat coils. And they say these, resemble the same kind of glowing wires that we see inside of a toaster, and that they consume vast amounts of electricity as they burn to keep you warm. So that is a concern. If they want to talk about putting these things in, and they're talking about how it's going to be helpful during to cooler environments, but to me it looks like the colder it gets outside, the more that thing has to work, the more energy that you're going to be using, the more electricity. So how is that going to be bringing down our bills at all, right? So I will go ahead and link this for you. This was another thing. So they said that eventually, a lot of these, they do actually use less energy, 50% less than an electrical furnace. But after what that person had just said, it kind of makes me question that. The other thing is, the price on average of these things are 2 to 3 times higher than an electric furnace. And who do you suppose is going to be asked to deal with those costs, right? It always gets passed on to the consumer. And going back to sort of this other page that I was on, he was talking about these SEER regulations and how, they're not always accurate, right? Which we know they love to sort of push numbers in their favor. The other thing was he said, he was talking in here about this Freon 22 and this law that was sort of put in practice by the Environmental Protection Agency, and how that is, gone into effect, that Freon will not be permitted to be imported nor manufactured in the USA in 2020. So that was something that went in. These heat pumps, they require a higher operating pressure, so that will mean that the tiniest leak can turn into a major problem. And these new regulations also created a lot of issues for these contractors and technicians, because they had to have all this new equipment to work with, and then these mandated refrigerants. And at the same time, they also had to keep this older equipment working. So they say, who pays for the cost of this, right? This is just, another hidden tax. And he goes on to explain how it's a hidden tax. So this is important to pay attention to, because they always want to push these things and they tell us it's better, sort of like the electric vehicles, right? We're all being told how wonderful these things are, but what they're not talking about is, the expense and what happens when, that engine goes out and how expensive that is to replace. And, most of us don't have the kind of money to go out and purchase these electric vehicles. And then you have the strains on the grid, and they keep talking about these fossil fuels as being the culprit. But then when you start looking at, sort of, there was a lot of different articles on here. This one actually came from Harvard Business Review, the dark side of solar power, right? And this, I mean, directly from Harvard, guys, they're talking about how this stuff is just going to sort of pile up. And by, I think it was 2050 that they mentioned in here. So they said that the large amounts of annual waste are anticipated by the early 2030s and could total 78 million tons by the year 2050. So that is a staggering amount. And right now, guys, they don't have anything in place to recycle any of this stuff. They don't have, I'm sure that eventually we're going to start seeing these sort of regulations and things that come out where they want to mandate, right? They're going to start mandating recycling as far as all of these different parts, because these things can't just go into the landfills and sort of sit there, because they're more of a forever trash, right? That stuff is going to cause a bigger problem. And when I sort of envision that, I look at it and I automatically think of that movie that Disney put out quite a few years back called Wall-E. Remember how all the trash just sort of piled up? That's what I started envision when I see this stuff, is this all this forever trash that they're not thinking through. They keep talking about this sustainable energy, this, this wonderful green energy, this environment they're creating. But in reality, again, they're not thinking long term. They're thinking short term. They never think long term. They never think big picture. They just try to clean up the mess, and then it's always too little too late. So this was another one in here. Stop these things. The truth Toxic Truth, millions of solar panels and wind turbine blades destined for landfills. And they talk about, all the different components of these things that we're really not told about, all of these forever chemicals and things that are in them, how they're a toxic cocktail of, arsenide and tellurium and crystalline silicone, lead, cadmium, all these like heavy earth metals that are really toxic and bad. And then they sort of just dump these things, and they're massive, right? Especially these wind turbines, they don't have the room for this kind of stuff, and it doesn't just decompose. It's a forever trash, and it's a big issue, and they don't have anything in place to recycle any of this stuff. So I wanted to bring this to you guys' attention because I just, as per usual, I find it interesting that they keep talking about how, they're going to be working with the consumer, when in reality all they're doing is coming out with more and more regulations for us as the consumer, right? More and more laws that are going to get passed down, things that we're going to have to navigate through, just kind of like in my state, how as of the 1st of January we have this plastic bag ban, and I've already talked about that a couple of different times, but I would imagine it's going to start coming across the United States. It isn't going to just stop here. I know they've already implemented it in several other states, but this is where things are going. It's just more and more of their control measures. They strain in a gnat and they swallow a camel. And so I just wanted to bring this article to you guys' attention. And we need to be aware of these things. We need to understand what it is, what their goals are, what they're working towards, how they're really not trying to protect the consumer or the local farmers. They are working on protecting themselves and their position, per usual. So if you guys have enjoyed this video today, please give me a like, share, and subscribe. Remember to pray, prep, and put God first. God bless.